Woods and forests can be strange and mystical places. They can be scary to walk around at night, and some of the thicker ones are even a little scary during daylight hours. You never quite know just what you might find in the depths of the woods, though. Perhaps something like the incredible things you're about to see in this video is hiding in the woods near you. Sutyagin House was once claimed to be the tallest wooden building in the world. It's a strange claim to fame, but the man who built it was quite an eccentric man. He was Nikolai Petrovich Sutyagin, and when reporters asked him why he was building the odd property in the forests of Kolmogorsky Rayon, Russia in 1992, he answered that he was doing it purely because he could. Sutyagin's structure was a 145-foot tall home with 13 stories. He got all of the framework completed, but never quite managed to finish off the interior. We think he probably got distracted. His original plan was just to build a 2-story regular home, but he fell in love with the Japanese vernacular design process and carried on building upward. He turned it into a 5-story building, but then he started to think he'd made an ugly mushroom, so he added even more height. Sutyagin never got to move into his home. He spent a few years in prison in the early 21st century, and without his attention, the structure deteriorated badly. By 2008, local authorities considered it to be a fire risk and condemned it. They were right to be worried. Fire destroyed almost the entire building in 2012. Javier Senozhin's organic house in Naucalpan, Mexico, is quite the sight to behold. It looks almost as if an Aztec snake god has manifested as a modern apartment complex. The correct name of the property is El Nido de Quetzalcoatl, but it's probably easier to call it the Snake House, which is what the locals do. Senozhin's apartments are set into the area's beautiful natural ravines, somehow managing to look like part of the landscape, despite containing all of the modern conveniences you'd expect of a luxury apartment complex. There are 10 apartments here in total, covering an area of over 16,000 square feet. Senozhin chose this specific location because he loves a challenge. The land the complex is built on is irregular and full of caves and trees. Rather than flattening the land out, cutting down the trees, or filling in the caves, he made them part of his design. Even the snake's head, which is the most instantly recognizable part of his design, is set into the mouth of a cave. Almost all of the architect's work is internal. Externally, the only alterations made to the landscape were those deemed necessary for safety. Francis Marion National Forest in South Carolina, USA, was almost totally destroyed by a storm more than 30 years ago. The most severe hurricane ever to strike South Carolina brought a 20-foot-high tide in from the sea and wiped out most of the ancient trees in the forest, but it didn't get all of them. Today, the forest is making a comeback, spurred on by new growth and conservation projects. But the most impressive sights in the forest are the enormous old trees that survived the storm. The Francis Marion National Forest itself was formally established in 1936. But the trees have been there far longer than that. They're thought to be 700 or 800 years old, and have grown so thick that they almost appear to have multiple trunks buried side by side in the mud. The damage caused by the hurricane has given them cuts and scars, but they're still standing, and they'll likely still be standing long after everyone watching this video has passed away. Nature can be destructive, but nature is also undefeated. Were the rocks at Parphrase Glen shaped by nature or nurture? The answer to that question is probably nature, but there's still enough ambiguity to leave room for doubt. The Glen is one of many strange rock formations that surround Devil's Lake in Baraboo, Wisconsin, USA. The lake was created during the last ice age, and there's evidence that the first humans ever to arrive in the area saw it as a sacred place. Even the lake is an enigma, as it sits in the middle of a chasm that has no visible inlet or outlet. Traversing the hiking train that runs through the area was a difficult task until the 1930s, when President Franklin Roosevelt ordered steps, pathways, and rails to be built into many of America's national parks to make them more accessible to the population. There's a gravity-defying balancing rock to see on the banks of the lake, but most people feel that the true star of the show at Devil's Lake is the incredible rock formation called Devil's Doorway. Nobody seems to know why the Devil's name has been attached to this area of outstanding natural beauty. It deserves a far prettier moniker. Birds live in nests, so why can't humans? Well, the answer to that probably has a lot to do with the fact that it really wouldn't be all that comfortable. But there's no reason why we couldn't if we wanted to. After all, it's perfectly possible to build a human-sized nest. Just ask the artist Patrick Dougherty, who's built more than 200 human-sized nests out of twigs all over the world since he began with his strange hobby in 1982. Most of Dougherty's works are based on cocoons, layers, hives, and nests made by wild animals, although some are more like huts and tree houses made of interwoven twigs and branches. Some of his creations are more elaborate than others, but he always attempts to give his nests a natural, thrown-together look, as if they'd been shaped by nature rather than human hands. They might look ramshackle, but some of them have remained standing, or in the case of those that are in trees, sitting, for more than 30 years. Works by Dougherty can be found all over the world, so if you want to find out whether there's one near you, we suggest you check out his website, stickwork.net. How freaked out would you be if you ventured deep into a forest only to find a humanoid shape made of glass staring right back at you? If the answer is very, you might want to stay away from the artist behind our next forest discovery. It's a set of ghostly glass statues standing in the forest land in Scotland. The sculptures, which are made from acrylic glass, can be found in woods close to Alloa and Loch Ard, and are the work of Scottish artist Rob Mulholland. All of his human figures are coated in mirrored perspex, and so they reflect the land around them, and thereby almost totally blend into the background. The effect has been compared to the invisibility effect applied to the monster in the 1980s Predator movie. In many instances, you can't even see the statues at all until you're almost standing next to them, so they can give walkers quite a shock if they wander into the woods without an awareness of what's hiding in there, waiting to greet them. The effect becomes especially weird when the figures show the reflections of the people looking at them. It's bad enough having a glass humanoid staring at you. Imagine how much worse it is when they're staring back at you from a distorted version of your own face. In 1984, Basque painter and sculptor Agustin Ibarola decided he wanted to create a new large-scale piece of artwork in his native part of Spain, but he didn't want to do it on a canvas or mount it on a plinth. Instead, he decided he was going to work with nature and create his colorful designs on the trees of Oma Valley. Today, the collective works he created are known as Bosque Animado, or to translate that into English, the living forest. Although the work is quite abstract, some ideas and symbols repeat across his work, including rainbows, human silhouettes, and eyes that appear to follow you wherever you go. The artist considered the viewer's position as he painted the trees and used that perspective to create designs that appear differently depending on which side of the forest you're looking at. Even after so many years exposed to the elements, the trees still look bright and vibrant, but part of their excellent state of preservation might be down to the lack of visitors. Hardly anybody knows that the living forest exists. Now you do, perhaps you'd like to go and see it. If you've never heard the phrase landscape aurora before, it's probably because you're not familiar with the work of an artist called Barry Underwood. He's a very unconventional artist, and he creates light shows among nature in an attempt to highlight the impact of human activity on the natural environment. Underwood's best-known work is a series of outdoor light installations called Scenes, which saw him take LED lighting and luminescent material to construct fantastical, almost magical scenes within caves and forests. Headlands 3 is one of his most striking works, as it appears almost like lava flowing down a hillside. Parade Field is another beautiful Underwood installation, decking out a field in a rainbow of colors. The artist's intention is apparently to create scenes that could be caused either by magic or pollution. Quite what taking LED lights into a forest, switching them on, and taking pictures of them has to do with pollution or global warming is a mystery to us. But who's to say what goes on inside the mind of an artist? Speaking of stunning works of art that you might come across in a forest setting, let's take a look at the work of the German artist Cornelia Conrads. She uses materials she finds in nature to create incredible optical illusion sculptures that appear to defy the laws of gravity. Using incredible skill and strategic placement of objects and camera lenses, Conrads is able to make it appear that logs, fences, and even entire doorways hang in the middle of the air. If you get too close to some of them, you can see the strings, but why would you want to get that close? It would spoil the magic. One of her most recent sculptures, a piece called Schleudersitz, takes the form of a gigantic slingshot made from a single park bench. It's the first work of art by Cornelia Conrads that the public is able to sit on, although by her own admission, it's more of a gimmick than a serious piece of art. Her more poignant pieces include a doorway in a forest and piles of logs that appear to be floating away into the sky. Her work is an allegory for the fragility of nature, and most onlookers find it to be an effective one. While it would be an exaggeration to say that Brooklyn Bridge Park in New York, USA is a forest, it certainly qualifies as a park. It has trees in it, and that means it's fine to be included in our list. We want to include it because, in 2015, Brooklyn Bridge Park turned into one enormous art installation called Please Touch the Art. The imaginative display was the work of Jeppe Hein, a Danish artist and sculptor. Rather than seeing art as something that the public should be allowed to look at but never touch, Hein wanted to create something truly interactive. His installations in the park include a series of water jets so intense that they look almost like walls, hence their name, the Appearing Rooms. He also created a mirrored replica of the New York skyline and called it Mirror Labyrinth NY. Sadly, it's too late to go and see the exhibition now as it's long gone, but it was a surreal thing to see at such an unusual location and made a lasting impression on everybody who was able to walk through it, and, as per the artist's request, touch it. You, like most people, are probably familiar with the concept of a sinkhole, but you may not have seen a cluster of 19 sinkholes inside each other before. Don't feel bad if you haven't. Scientists had never seen anything like this either until November 2019. The sinkholes are thought to be the largest cluster of their kind in the world, and have a total volume of more than 3 million cubic feet. The space inside them is so vast that it has its own ecosystem, and yet the entire cluster has evaded detection until now because it's hidden deep inside a forest close to Baize in Guangxi. A cluster of 50 sinkholes was found in Shanxi province 5 years earlier, but those holes didn't have the volume of this set. Descending into the sinkholes is extraordinarily dangerous, but those who have been brave enough to do so report that there are entire valleys and waterfalls within the holes, along with a thick layer of vegetation that includes tall palm trees. Staring into the sinkholes is like peering into another world, and while we wouldn't recommend getting too close to anything like this in person, it's fun to look at the pictures. Here's another art installation that we're afraid you missed out on if you weren't there to see it at the time. For 2 years, between 2009 and 2011, the French artist François Michan exhibited a piece he called L'Arbre aux Chelles inside Parc du Château in Chaumont-sur-Loire, France. The name of the exhibition translates into English as Tree of Ladders, which gives you a clue about what to expect from it. It's a seemingly endless series of ladders leading from ground level up into the branches of the park's tallest trees, there to disappear into the thick foliage. Mician was inspired by the Italian writer Italo Calvino, whose novel The Baron in the Trees imagined a person climbing into the trees purely as a means of escaping the stresses of everyday life. Mician's ladders are supposed to be an invitation to the viewer to imagine reaching the treetops and looking down on the world from high up above. The key word in that sentence is imagine. Touching the ladders was strictly prohibited. We had no idea there were so many art installations in the world's forests until we made this video. So maybe there's one in the woods near you right now.
Subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and enjoy watching new videos on my channel. Thanks for watching and see you soon!